Hey everyone, it's the year's 1999, back at you with another video. Today we're going to be talking about a very powerful second level spell called Spiritual Weapon. Now, many clerics use Spiritual Weapon to aid themselves in battle, but one of my favorite aspects of it is that it can take any form you want, and I would encourage you to lean into that. And with that in mind, I'm going to be going through the different cleric domains to give example weapons of what different kind of clerics might use, and while we're at it, maybe also see how multiclassing might affect your spiritual weapon, and some other miscellaneous weapon ideas that I had. Now, keep in mind that no matter how I might describe what the attack from a different weapon would look like, it's still going to follow the same basic rules laid out in the spell description. To clarify, that means that it moves 20 feet per round and can hit a creature within 5 feet of it for 1d8 force damage plus your spellcasting mod. Although, if you want to, go ahead and talk to your DM about possibly changing the damage type that this weapon does for you based on the build you have. I mean, after all, if you're customizing the character, maybe you can also lean into it that way. Now, for the first domain is Ambition. These are clerics who are determined to achieve their goals no matter what cost they may pay. Their power set seems to be a cross between the light and trickery domains, so how about for a weapon, a torch that burns in strange colors? Next is Arcana. This is a wizardly cleric, kind of like how Eldritch Knight is a wizardly fighter. For this one, I would say that their weapon takes the form of a magic wand that floats around and shoots projectiles kind of like a magic missile at targets. And this also works if you're getting this spell, for instance, as a Divine Soul Sorcerer or a Theurgist Wizard. Next is the Death Cleric. Woo! This one's all about manipulating forces of death and undeath. So for them, perhaps their spiritual weapon could be an actual weaponized spirit. Like it physically takes the form of a ghost that flows around and smashes into people to attack them. And then there's the Forge Cleric. These are clerics of crafting and smithing. I actually have a personal example from this. I was playing as a Forge Cleric named Cliff Enville, and his spiritual weapon was a bellows that was designed to make it look like he was shooting fire at its targets. Next is Grave Cleric, pretty much the inverse of the Death Cleric. These focus on the, just sort of natural essence of dying, and they try to avoid raising undead. So perhaps a Grim Reaper style scythe would work well for this. Knowledge Cleric. These are very studious clerics that, like to read and learn more about the world. I could see them maybe summoning like a big book to squash their foes with. Life. The classic cleric build. They're normally seen as healers, but they can still pack a punch. Ooh, maybe your spiritual weapon is just, a red cross that flies around attacking people. Now, there's light. Pretty straightforward. This is about the general concept of light, be that a hearth or the sun. I could see them perhaps throwing like a, ball of fire or a torch, or maybe even making a sword that glows out of pure sunlight. Nature. This is like, plants and animal connections. Maybe they make a vine whip that floats around attacking people, or they summon a full-on tree to march over and whack at their foes. Order clerics. These are clerics that focus on the ideals of law and logic. So perhaps like a gavel to render judgment on those they consider to be wrongdoers. Peace. These are the diplomatic clerics who talk through their problems or try to put a quick end to them. Perhaps, we take the Teddy Roosevelt approach. Speak softly and carry a big stick. Solidarity. These are clerics who stand strong with their allies as a cohesive unit, kind of like many bricks forming a wall. This is why their spiritual weapon should take the form of a brick wall that they throw around at people, because why not? Like I said, it can be literally anything. You want it to take the form of a brick wall that floats around and hits people, you can do that. Strength. Clerics that embody the, ideals of strength and achievement through human effort. This could possibly encourage them to, use great weights as weapons against their foes. Tempest. Mighty Storm Clerics. I could see them, maybe making like a small storm cloud over the heads of their enemies to strike them with bolts of force lightning. Yes, Trickery Clerics. I guess they're kind of the opposite of the Order Clerics. They're all about opposing standards and defying accepted practices, for good or for ill. My first thought as a spiritual weapon is perhaps an Assassin's Dagger. Or, if you want to have a more whimsical character, maybe just go with something completely non-threatening as part of the trick. You conjure up random items like a bowl of soup or a pillow to hit people with. Twilight. These are clerics who walk between the worlds of day and night, between the dark and the light. For a weapon, perhaps they manifest a collection of stars to fight with. Perhaps the stars come together to make a constellation sword. The war domain. Pretty straightforward. Clerics of war. Maybe they've got like a really big over-the-top weapon, like a four-sided sword that flies around slashing into enemies. Last up, Zeal. You know how some subclasses will give one class the ability of another class? For instance, the Arcane Trickster Rogue or the Celestial Patron Warlock? Well, this takes that idea a step forward. These are Zealot Barbarian Clerics. So they hold inside of them a flaming passion that lets them sidestep the very constraints of death. So perhaps for a spiritual weapon, they project forward that burst of flame. Now, those are the official domains, but let's take a look at, cleric multi-class options. Some of these, of course, would just line up with different clerical domains. For example, Druid could have the same weapon as the Nature domain, Fighter could have the War weapon, and Wizard could have the Arcane weapon. But as for other multi-classes, well, maybe an Artificer. They have a collection of small tools that act as a weapon, like a hammer on top and a saw at the bottom that flies around cutting into and knocking down enemies. A Bard's cleric weapon, well, I've actually got two ideas. One, it could take the form of an instrument itself that they throw at people, or if their instrument is their holy symbol, maybe when they play, the song of spiritual weapon, it causes musical notes to manifest that are the weapon. A monk cleric. This could manifest as a spiritual martial artist that beats up their enemies. To be honest, this main idea, the monk cleric making another monk, is the main reason why I made this video. I just love the idea of just a second monk stepping out from you like an echo knight to help you fight your battles. For a ranger cleric, perhaps they summon forth from the ground a mighty beast that trods across the battlefield, stomping down your enemies. And lastly, a warlock cleric could have something that's reminiscent of their patron, like, for instance, a demon's claw that they use, or a hexblade's blade, effectively. And before we wrap this up, here's a few more random ideas. If you're a cowboy type, maybe you could have like a bullwhip. And, frying pans, they're pretty solid weapons. Everyone loves a good frying pan, magical or otherwise. If you have a magician aesthetic, maybe you summon playing cards to launch at people. In a modern or futuristic setting, you could make a small car to run down your enemies. Perhaps a gun/cannon to shoot with. Okay, so in post I was editing this, and I noticed that, the way I've got the cannon immediately replace the car, just sort of the same sort of setup. And all I could think about when I saw that was, no fair, cowboys couldn't afford cannons. Boom! They couldn't afford station wagons either. Boom! I need to include more jokes in these videos. And that's all I really have for today. If you want to check out some of my other videos, I've got a similar one for different themes on how to play Barbarian, and for my thoughts on the Cleric domains, I have a top 10 list ranking all of those. I also run a few D&D actual play podcasts. The first one is called Enter the Dungeon. It's, classic D&D fantasy game where they're trying to track down magical artifacts known as the planar gems. Let's see, now that series has a companion show going on where we're running through the Out of the Abyss module. And lastly is a beautifully weird mashup of different fandoms that I actually just finished going through an arc featuring the Hunchback of Notre Dame. So that's certainly something. But I really hope you enjoyed this video. Put your thoughts of it down in the comments below, and until next time, have a great day, and God bless.